Hi, I am Jennifer Epstein. I am the control owner of Boston Legacy Football Club, Team 15 in the NWSL, launching in Boston in March of 2026. And I am excited to be here to participate in a panel on the culture question and how we build winning organizations.
Hi, and I'm Jason Arthur. I'm CEO of Mission 44 and Director of Impact for Sir Lewis Hamilton, very much focused on how we can work with Lewis Hamilton to transform the lives of young people around the world so they can do well at school and also access great jobs in STEM. And so the session today is very much thinking about culture and inclusivity as part of culture to make sure that underrepresented talent can really add value and benefit and thrive in a high-performing organization.
Hello, everyone. How are we doing? We're standing between you and lunch, so we will aim to make this as efficient and effective as possible. We're going to dive right in following the intros. It's been said that culture eats strategy for breakfast. I'm sure many have heard that quote. Said more plainly, no matter how brilliant your business strategy is, if you do not have a culture that is aligned and positive, your strategy is doomed to fail. I think we would all agree from that standpoint. Research has been pretty clear over time. Those that have a positive and aligned strategy tend to generate outsized and positive returns in the long run. And what you see is that employees who work in those cultures tend to be 4 times more likely to be engaged and 6 times more likely to recommend that place to friends as the place you'd want to work. So with that, we'll turn to our esteemed panelist here. And I'll ask each of you, how would you define a winning culture? What does it mean to you in your current roles? Jill, we'll start with you.
Thanks, Brandon, and thanks for having us here today. You mentioned strategy each culture for breakfast, probably breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I think we're all in fast-moving organizations and in motorsports. I think a winning culture means, is it equally as important as what you're trying to do from a business standpoint? I think what tends to happen in a lot of organizations is that culture is an HR thing, or it's a softer skill set, and then the strategy is the business decision and what you're trying to do. And I think if those two, culture and strategy, aren't married together and very symbiotic, then your strategy is not going to work because your culture is not going to allow you to get there. And I think when we're building either the new team that we're working on right now or leveraging existing teams, do they have the right culture to let the strategy succeed?
Jen, how are you?
Thanks, Brandon. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. I guess I'd say in building an expansion team, building from the ground up, thinking about how we build the culture is of critical importance. And, it starts out with thinking about how we can have a player-first, employee-first state of mind, where both of those critical parts of the organization feel valued and supported and empowered so they can perform really to the best of their ability. We are building this club for the long term. We are, the approach is this is a club for Boston for decades to come, and, it's Boston's next legacy. And so that philosophy is what guides us in how we build a winning culture where we have both players and staff that want to join the organization, want to contribute, want to learn, and want to stay.
Jason.
So for Mission 44, just to perhaps share a bit about our organization, because unlike the rest of the panelists, we're focused on predominantly non-profit activity. Our focus is on how do we transform the lives of young people from underserved communities to be able to really progress in education and into STEM and motorsport, with our founder being Sir Lewis Hamilton. So what we've tried to do as we have built this organization over the last 4 years is draw from both power sources. So Lewis in motorsport, his expertise, that high performance culture that permeates through F1, real focus on data, real focus on attention to detail, on collaboration, on psychological safety, but the non-profit mission behind Mission 44 means that everything that we do has to be focused ultimately on that underpinning vision of transforming young people's lives. So centering that in every single conversation that we're having as an organization, as a team, as we grow, absolutely then guides how we work with each other, how we work with the organizations which we fund as a grant maker, how we interact with young people. So taking the best out of, I guess, a more competitive sporting environment, but also the values of the non-profit sector as well.
And just to stay with you on that topic, what's been the biggest challenge as you've built the organization from a culture standpoint thus far?
I mean, I feel very fortunate to be able to work with Lewis, looking at everything he's achieved. He has been able to translate ambition and overcoming significant odds to become the greatest F1 driver of all time. That level of ambition, combined with the fact that this is a man who has done everything quickly, then permeates through how we think about things at Mission 44. So he wants us to be ambitious, he wants us to go fast and be bold. And so taking that on, embracing that, because it's such a powerful energy for us, but also recognizing that sometimes actually you have to go slow. And if you really want to build a powerful culture and take people along with you, make sure that the strategy is right, make sure that you're building the right collaboration, even though you may want to go fast, sometimes you've got to slow it down in order to be able to go faster later down the line. I think that's been one of our biggest challenges. We all want to transform as many young people's lives as quickly as we can, but sometimes you've got to be measured and make sure you're making the right decisions and bringing people along with you.
Got it. Jill, how about you?
Biggest challenge?
Challenge, yeah.
Let's see, building a Formula One team based in the US from the ground up, probably right now. I think treating it like a startup mentality and taking advantage of the unique opportunity that provides. You know, Jennifer talked about, building something for the long term, but the decisions you make today need to have that lasting effect. So I think, the biggest challenge is that every hire is a key hire, but you have to make 400 of them at any given time. So, how do you make sure to hire the right people, bring the right ingredients together? And it's not about hiring necessarily the best performer or the highest skill set, although you want that. It's who's going to be the most additive to the culture that you want to build. And if you don't start with that foundation, then it's going to be difficult to hit the more tangible goals. So I think the challenge is knowing that, what is another saying, quick to hire, slow to hire, quick to fire. Bring in the right people at the right time. You have to take the time, but time is our biggest enemy. So I think the challenge is just knowing that each decision is going to be crucial, but making sure you take the time to make those right decisions.
Yeah, cultures are inevitably linked to people, as you mentioned. So as you think about particularly your senior leaders and the personalities, behaviors they're looking for, Jen, as you have been working with your co-founders to build leadership both from a business and a sporting perspective, how have you thought about the profiles of those people, and what have you learned thus far as you've built that team?
I mean, I think, we are building a club in a market that the standard is championships. So we have to, I think, approach all of our decision as, with this, as relentless competitors, in every aspect in the ways that we build the club. And so, with that mindset, of course, the first thing we turn our attention to is our people, which are, your biggest asset. And how do you hire the right balance of experienced senior leaders and also bring in some, innovation. I think women's sports is really a place where, you can need to think, about some different revenue streams, and you need to bring a diversity of perspective, a plurality of voices. So, we have on the sporting side, we have a mix, really. We have a GM that has never been a GM before, but he comes from FC Barcelona, Dominic Guasch. He was head of management of women's football, so he has decades of experience with that club. We brought in a very experienced coach, Felipe Petau, from the Portuguese club Benfica, and on the business side, our team president, Jennifer Van Dyke, she comes from, 25 years of experience in some iconic sports and entertainment organizations, Wasserman, the NBA. But then you look at our ticket sales staff, and we have some really fresh young voices. There's probably a handful that have come straight out of college, or it's their second job, and they bring just that energy and excitement and that real fan-first approach to their pitch and their sell. So it's really about finding a balance. And I very much agree, that taking your time. I mean, we took a long time before we hired our team president, longer than I would have liked to have taken. But sometimes it takes a while to find the right senior leader, and I'm really pleased with where we've landed.
Jill, you've had the benefit of working across motorsport, and Jason commented how, I think we all agreed, very much a high-performance sector. So as you think about your time at NASCAR, Sonoma Raceway, now with Cadillac F1, and the holding company more broadly, how have you thought about key hires, what you need in them to really set the tone for the organizations you've been in?
Yeah, it's interesting because, your approach has to change a little bit based on the maturity of the organization that you're trying to manage. So in Jennifer's case, those key hires are brand new. At the Cadillac F1 team, those hires are going to be new. But at NASCAR, when you made a key hire, does it fit within the existing ecosystem there? And can you manage a big organization? And how do you deal with kind of differing points of view and objectives? But I think that what we're really trying to do is, who can you bring in that's not just a culture fit, but adds to the culture? And can they make their people around them better? And so when you do that, then your culture, back to one of the earlier points, does fit your strategy. And I'll use a tangible example at Sonoma Raceway. When we started there and took over that facility, it was, we had this strategy to build, a premier motorsports venue in the world. But we had a culture that was just basically trying to get to the next event without something catching on fire. Those things don't mix. So you want to be you have these high aspirations, but if the people that you have lower expectations and don't fit that aspiration, then you have to make some changes. So I think really just adapting what you're looking for, but to Jen's point, the culture being the focal point. You can't go back and fix that after. So if you have people that you bring in and they want to be, it's a stretch goal for them, or they want to be a part of the journey, they want to be a part of the startup, that has to be the attraction, probably more so than the functional expertise that someone can bring.
Got it. Jason, as you've built your team at Mission 44, would love to hear about how you've struck the balance between delivering performance, which you certainly talked about a bit, but also maintaining the well-being of your staff. A lot of conversation now around mental health. As you think about working with younger generations of talent, they're very mindful of having that balance at work where they can. How have you thought about that with your team?
The fortunate thing for me as being the first employee is you're not having to unpick things, so being able to build, hopefully thoughtfully right from the outset, to try and get that balance is definitely something that I've sought to do. And to, as we've brought new colleagues on, engage with them right from the outset about what well-being means to them at a personal level, what types of infrastructure and systems, processes can sustain a healthy culture of well-being across the organization. And so, part of it is making sure that we've got the flexibility so that each individual can be clear about what they need in order to be able to sustain a healthy work-life balance. And so we're not restrictive about, the amount of time that you need to be in the office or anything like that. It's very much about a focus on outcomes and you working in a way which enables you to deliver those outcomes rather than presenteeism. We have regular sessions as a team reflecting on individual and collective well-being. We get external people to come in to provide training. We give people well-being budgets. In August, we end on a Friday slightly earlier so that people can recharge and have a bit of a summer shutdown. So we've tried to be very progressive in how we think about well-being and generous with annual leave and all the rest of it. But we exist because we are here to transform as many young people's lives as possible. And so we have to balance that with our focus always being on that guiding mission. And so there's a level of accountability as well, that you take ownership for well-being. The organization will make sure that we're constantly investing in your well-being, but we're also going to be really clear about what our objectives are, what outcomes need to be delivered. There's often a kind of pervasive culture of niceness that can exist within the charity sector because we think we're doing good work.
It doesn't exist in motorsport.
Being frank about it, I do want to pull a bit of that, which is it's not about being just nice to each other. It's actually holding each other to account about, are we doing the best that we can as a charity? Are we being as efficient as possible? Are we clear about the outcomes that we're delivering with our partners? So you've got to get, and it's difficult, but that sweet spot between the two.
Now, one of the topics I think that was also mentioned for the session is just the idea of running a lean operation. I think you all are building or have built from scratch. As you think about the delicate balance of investing in people, resources more broadly, and doing it for growth, how do you strike that balance with also maintaining an organization that is financially viable, sustainable for the long term? Jen, to what you talked about earlier.
I mean, you always have to have the strategic mindset that you're investing for growth. As an expansion team, that's all we are doing right now is we're bit of a ways still away from meaningful revenue. We're investing for growth and trying to position ourselves from a position of financial strength, right? So again, we're really focused on infrastructure, and that's both the people, the talent, and our physical infrastructure. We are renovating a stadium in the heart of the city with the city of Boston. It'll be the second stadium in the world where a women's team will be the primary pro tenant. We are building a world-class practice facility. So, we believe that our investment in our infrastructure will allow us to achieve the long-term ROI that we're looking for. So, I guess we are right now, we're building a next generation business. We are entering a new phase of our business operations where we're scaling for revenue and looking for long-term partners and, just laying the long-term foundation to build a great business.
Jill, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think when you try to look at investment and doing the startup, it goes back to, are you hiring kind of multi-talented players? Are you drafting the best available athlete? And those are the types of decisions you have to make when you're trying to build a team, and probably not just a startup for that matter. I think that back to being a culture ad, are the key hiring choices you're making elevating the people around them? Are they deliberate about doing that? You can hire the best talent. In one of my previous roles, not related to motorsports, there was a valuation tool that we use, which is about the what and the how. So you can go get the most successful, functional leader that delivers huge results, but how they get there, if they leave scorched earth and failed relationships and upset employees in their wake, then that's not the right investment. So it's less about going to hire the highest paid talent. And this is not actually traditional in motorsports. Usually you go out and get the best driver, the best engineer, the best whatever. But I think right now, particularly when you're building a startup team, maybe the best athlete is the best person. But if that's not the case, then you need to err on the side of going with the cultural piece, because it's the building block of what of your foundation.
I want to shift to topics of development and inclusivity within organizations. Jason, you're working with young people who are typically underrepresented going into organizations and having those opportunities. You talk about once you get into an organization, what does it look like to have an inclusive environment that knows how to actually bring those folks in and not just get the best out of them, but make them feel welcome as well? How do you think about that with your partners as you work with them?
Yeah, it's hugely important for us. So just to give an example which maybe brings us to life, one of the things that we focus on within the UK is how do we recruit more ethnic minority teachers. If you want young people from ethnic minority backgrounds to be able to achieve at school, having role models from their communities is important. But what we see in the UK is that even though ethnic minority communities are more likely to put themselves forward to become teachers, they're less likely to get recruited. And then when they are recruited, they're more likely to leave the profession. And if they stay, they're less likely to end up in senior leadership roles. So for us, thinking about that sector, it's been very much, first of all, how are we engaging with ethnic minority teachers about their experience of the recruitment process, the challenges that they face in terms of accessing potential routes once they're within those settings, what's their experience, whether it's in terms of senior leadership teams, working directly with young people, the governing bodies of schools. And then when we're working with schools and school networks, it's about trying to then bridge those gaps. So getting the voices of those teachers backed by then evidence that we've commissioned research, backed by the organizations who have tested different interventions and sharing the tools and frameworks that they use to those school leaders to say, look, there is a whole set of people from a range of communities who could be enriching the lives of your students. Here's how to best go and get them. Here's how to best keep them there. But they need to understand how to do it, and that can come from practical resources, but just as powerfully, it's about hearing the voices of those underrepresented groups to say, this is what we need. And if you don't ask, and if you then ask, you don't do something with that feedback, it's then very difficult to see change happen.
Just to that point of allowing space for those voices, Jen, as you've been building the club, talk about just what you've done to create space for those voices, an environment where innovation can thrive because you're hearing those different perspectives.
I mean, I will say for me personally, I tend to interrupt, so I've really had to slow down and learn from my staff to listen, and really give space, a lot of communication, a lot of feedback, so people, feel comfortable asking questions. I mean, like I said, we have experienced leaders, and then we have some team members that are fresh out of college. I want every one of them to feel equally safe to contribute, to learn, to ask questions. And I think, one way you do that is make sure that lesson, that you show that example from the top. And, as a club, certainly wasn't a strategy I recommend, but, we launched our club with a name and a brand that didn't take off in the way that we wanted it to. There was a lot of work behind it, but it missed the mark. And as an ownership group, me and my partners, we weren't afraid to hold ourselves accountable and to listen to the feedback, and ultimately go through a really great process where those that were the most critical became our biggest supporters. So I think now that's what our staff has seen, that, we're human, we can make mistakes, we learn, and we get better. And, and that's the culture that we want to have within the organization.
Jill, over the course of your career, how have you thought about just creating clear pathways for growth, leadership development for the folks on your team?
I think it goes back to intention, and I think a lot of times, most of my career has been in motorsports for some odd reason, but that's a discussion for another panel. But the excuse, in my experience in motorsports, is it's fast, it's a long season, there's always reasons not to invest in the things like culture. Jason talked about, the culture of nice. I think the crutch sometimes in motorsports is that we're too busy to worry about that. So I think when you talk about diversity of voices and how important that is to building an organization, especially today, it means that you have to be more disciplined and deliberate about it. What is your intention? Because it's always easy to fall back and say, it's too busy, the season's too long, we don't have time to work on well-being and those types of really important items. I mean, you have to step back as leaders and say, no, I'm going to make time for this. And it's not even I'm going to make time, it's an equal priority for me as delivering a result on the track or in the business world. So I think it's about setting that intention and then holding yourself accountable to deliver against that intention.
Got it. I'll start to wrap us up. Jason, as you think about advice for the audience, particularly as it relates to attracting, developing, retaining the next generation of great leaders and operators, what would you say to the group?
Look, frankly, we're in a time where discussion about underrepresentation, diversity, inclusion is really under challenge. I'd say mostly for the wrong reasons, but for some understandable reasons as well. What we say at Mission 44 is the focus on those issues is not about just a kind of social good. It's not like meeting your CSR responsibilities as an organization. We would say it's a business need. When we work with organizations in F1, for example, we've worked with Mercedes, we're working now with Ferrari, we talk about that talent being able to make those organizations more effective, to make the car go faster. You want to be reaching out to as many people as you can and trying to draw that talent from those communities. So thinking in that way, I would really encourage people just to hold on to.
Jen and Jill, if you could give the audience one piece of advice about either building or bolstering an organization's culture and talent, what would it be? Jen?
I guess I would say prioritize and invest in your talent. It is the team behind the team that is gonna create an environment for your players to be able to perform at the highest level. I mean, I think we're assembling a group that really have believe in the idea that we are building something that is bigger than ourselves. And with that attitude, that's how we are going to bring another championship home to Boston, how we're gonna win on the pitch, but we're also gonna win in the community and ensure that our club, is embedded in the hearts and the minds of our fans. And that's all through investing in the right talent.
Jill?
Well said. I think, the right thing is always the right thing. And so if you're investing in your people and you find people that put the team goals above their individual goals, and you communicate that that's how they'll get to their individual goals, then you'll build a team that's unstoppable. So if it's about the people, then you can't go wrong.
Excellent. Well, thank you to all of you, and thank you to the audience for attending, and enjoy the rest of Leaders.